This influencer was arrested for faking her own kidnapping, allegedly because she wanted more followers. Are we serious now? The internet has this ability to always surprise me with how desperate some people are for some basic attention. This person essentially sat down and thought to herself, I need to be interesting enough for some attention. How am I going to do that? Well, I guess I could stage a kidnapping. Why? So meet Monique de Fraga, a 27-year-old content creator from Greater Recife area in Pernambuco, Brazil. I can already tell I'm probably going to butcher a whole lot of pronunciations of the Brazilian locations in this video, so show me some mercy, please. I will try my best. But she was running a lifestyle-focused Instagram account, and she was starting to build, a little bit of an audience, along with some local recognition as a creator. But by April 2025, police say that her audience had started to shrink. And according to investigators, that's the context behind everything that followed. Because on April 21st, 2025, my birthday apparently last year, Monique reported to the police that her and her husband, Lucas Vieira, had been violently kidnapped right outside their home. Her side of the story was detailed and disturbing, to put it lightly. So the two of them were inside their car near their house when three men, armed and masked, surrounded the vehicle and forced them out. The couple was then taken to a forested area where men held them for hours under the threat of torture, demanding a ransom before they would let them go. She said that Lucas was physically attacked during the ordeal, and the kidnappers initially demanded 100,000 reals, which is roughly 18 grand US. And they were only released after a small fraction of that amount was paid. Now, after everything that happened, Monique did not go quiet. She recorded and posted videos on her social media accounts, walking her followers through the whole experience, visibly shaking, describing the men's approach, what they said, and what the hours in captivity felt like. She also actively reached out to local news outlets, and several of them ran her story. The military police confirmed at the time a ransom had been paid and that the couple were released. An official report was formally filed, and the civil police of Pernambuco opened a criminal investigation. And from what I understand, the Brazilian police is kind of divided into three branches: the federal, civil, and the military. And the difference between the last two is that the military police are basically the ones who make the patrols and the arrest, while the civil police are the ones who investigate. And for a stretch of time, everything seemed like a genuine case. She was just a local influencer who had survived something terrible and was being open about it publicly. However, over the following months, as investigators from the GOE, a special operations unit for the civil police, dug deeper into the case, several things just didn't add up. There were contradictions in the testimonies, the dynamics of how the crime supposedly played out, and that raised some red flags. Then there was a specific relationship that investigators uncovered. One of the men who was alleged to have carried out the kidnapping had a prior relationship with Monique herself. And according to the GOE, the two hadn't just crossed paths once. No, they were apparently in contact before and after the date of the alleged kidnapping. And that allowed the police officers to piece together this alleged deception. I mean, that's pretty brazen to think you're gonna get away with something like this as you're keeping in contact with the person who did all of this before and after. Like, come on. Police also pointed to the props used to sell the story, including a stolen car with a cloned VIN and the real firearms during the abduction. And the GEO deputy described these as deliberate choices meant to make the scheme look like a genuine crime, as she was going through a decline on social media. So now you have the investigators identifying at least 4 people who they believe played a role in carrying out the scheme alongside of Monique. And each of their situations ended up going in a very different direction, to put it lightly. So the first one is Denner da Silva. Denner da Silva is Monique's former partner and the man described as the leader of the operation. By the time the arrest warrant came through, Denner was already sitting in jail on a separate homicide charge. Hold up, okay. So he was formally charged in the kidnapping case as well, while already behind bars. And the second man identified was Caio de Santana, who allegedly drove the car used to move the couple in this alleged abduction. Caio, he never made it to trial, as his life was taken in another city in the Greater Recife area exactly 1 week before the operation was carried out. So Yeah. Then you had a third guy in the car during the kidnapping, but police have not yet been able to identify him. And then apparently there was a fourth person on the investigators' radar who is someone who's suspected of receiving a share of the ransom money after everything played out, and who was essentially based in a completely different city in a state of Sao Paulo. And just to put this in perspective, where the kidnapping happened and where this guy was based, are like on the other sides of the country. Like that's a road trip and a half to get there. But according to the police, the kidnapper's initial ransom call was made to Monique's own mother. The men demanded money for her daughter's release, and the lady, with no reason to believe any of this wasn't real, made a bank transfer to the account they provided. And even though the initial demand was 100,000 reals, Monique's mom ended up paying just 6,000, which is $1,162 in today's currency. And that account was the link that they would trace later to the Sao Paulo state, which led to the fourth search warrant. Also, who in their right mind is using their real bank account for something like this? So essentially, did they do all of this for, a social media play for the daughter and to scam her mother? The real victims in all of this was Monique's mother and Lucas, her husband. If this is true, what an awful person, scamming her mother and her husband for some attention on the internet. Are you serious? But again, that is if this is all true, because Monique's defense takes a little bit of a different approach. So she's arguing the money was a loan, not extortion, intended only to secure the ransom, and that it was repaid afterwards. And that's now, I guess, a part of this legal dispute. I don't know about you guys, but a forced loan would still be theft. But I guess the worst part is this isn't even something that got lost in translation. This is translated as accurately as possible. Because yes, I hired a Brazilian researcher to help me with the story because all of this is in Portuguese, so shout out Gustavo. But on the morning of March 24th, 2026, nearly 11 months after the kidnapping was reported, the civil police of Pernambuco launched what they called Operation Curtain of Lights. Come to think about it, I should have probably asked Gustavo how to pronounce most of these names here. We'll get him next time, Gustavo. But 30 officers took part in this operation and executing 2 arrest warrants with 2 search and seizure warrants across multiple locations: the greater Recife area, the capital of neighboring state, Pernambuco, and Sao Paulo. Monique was arrested in her home early that morning, and then she was brought to the GOE headquarters, then taken to the Legal Medicine Institute for forensic examination. And the charges on the table for her are now extortion, procedural fraud, and false crime reporting. But Monique's attorney, in an interview, called the case a legal aberration and framed it as a media-driven stunt rather than a legitimate investigation. So I guess his position is straightforward. The kidnapping happened and the client had nothing to do with planning it. In his words, she had no need for engagement or likes. She also had no reason to keep the 6,000 reals. It was essentially a kidnapping carried out by amateurs, and she was not involved in organizing it. He also pushed for Monique to be transferred to house arrest, arguing that she has young children, but as of the time of the video, a decision on that request is still pending, and Monique herself hasn't really made any public statements since her arrest. So I mean, if all of this is true, what a waste. 30 police officers, cross-state coordination, nearly a year of investigative work, and all of this was triggered, I guess if the police was right, by someone who simply wanted more followers on social media? Really? I'm still trying to connect the dots on how someone comes to this conclusion of doing something this brazen for some attention online. Like, did she really think she was gonna get away with this? I guess so. But wow, maybe the plan wasn't to go viral with a kidnapping video. Maybe it was like a 2-step play. First, become the news story, then ride the coattail of that new come fame with all the videos saying, hey, look, this is what happened when I got kidnapped, which, seems like what she did. Because I mean, like, if you're just thinking about it, local lifestyle creator with barely 30,000 followers, she's not gonna like blow up from posting food pictures, but a local woman who survived a brutal kidnapping and is now openly talking about it, suddenly news outlets, they're interested. They're running the story, they're putting her face on the pages, and now all those readers, people watching TV, are like one tap away from her profile. And then obviously she followed it up with all this content, visibly shaken, walking her audience through every detail of what happened. So I mean, if the police are right here, was that the goal? But also, I can't really see that being very sustainable because people just move on. But as it stands, there seems to be 2 completely different versions of what happened in the greater Recife area on April 21st of last year. While police say the evidence points clearly towards a staged crime, the defense says the kidnapping was real and the woman was a victim. So That's a question they'll figure out in court, but I guess whoever named this Operation Curtain of Likes had already made their opinion pretty clear. But either way, feel free to subscribe if you're new here. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace. Also, happy Easter, guys. Hope you guys had a wonderful holiday with your friends and family.